The Senator from Georgia.
Mr. President, I'm delighted that the Senate is talking about our veterans. I'm disappointed that the bill that's before us did not go through the entire committee process. I'm grateful that Senator Byrd, the ranking member, has brought forward a side-by-side bill, which I would like to discuss for a moment on the floor of the Senate. And I'm particularly glad that that bill also brings up the Iran sanctions issue. I know the administration has kind of backed away from the sanctions because of some things that happened recently and does not want a sanctions bill to pass the Senate. But I've followed closely what's happened in the Middle East. I go back to 1979 when Georgians were held hostage in the American embassy in Tehran for 444 days. I have a lot of experience with that part of the world, and I think there's some things we should be reminded of. This bill, the Byrd bill, that includes the veterans' benefits, also includes nuclear weapons sanctions on Iran and most of the provisions of the Nuclear Weapons-Free Iran Act. In particular, three things are important to note. One, it reimposes existing sanctions suspended under the interim agreement if Iran cheats on its commitment, drags its feet in negotiations, or threatens the West with long-range missiles or terrorism. Number two, it ensures that the final agreement must require Iran to dismantle its illicit nuclear infrastructure to prevent Iran from being able to produce a nuclear weapon. And third, it threatens to impose additional economic sanctions in the future should Iran cheat on its commitment or fail to agree to the final deal that dismantles its nuclear infrastructure. I have watched the television set. I have seen the international reports. I have listened to what the Iranians are saying since we have had this interim agreement, and here's what it says. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani pledged that under no circumstances, and that's a direct quote, would Iran agree to dismantle a single centrifuge in a final nuclear agreement. This is what he's saying now, and we're talking about getting to a final agreement months from now. Second, during Iran's National Day celebrations in which American flags were burned, Rouhani declared, and I quote, "We will permanently continue to progress our nuclear technology," end quote. Third, former Iranian top nuclear negotiator Hossein Mavani told Iran media in a recent interview that the Islamic Republic will never, and I underscore never, agree to dismantle portions of its nuclear infrastructure. Iran nuclear negotiator Majid Ravanchi reiterated Iran would not accept the closure of, and I quote, any of its nuclear sites. Next, an Iran official on February the 12th set aside the idea of potentially altering a nuclear reactor so that other nations would fear the production of atomic bomb fuel. And finally, Iran will determine its needs regarding uranium enrichment on its own, the country's chief nuclear scientist said on February 25th, and will not, and I underscore not, accept foreign powers dictating its enrichment policy. Iran is advancing its nuclear ballistics testing system and has fired nuclear missiles to test its capability. Iran has deployed 2 ships in the Atlantic just to show as a show of force on the United States of America. And they continue in every way possible to be a surrogate fighter in Syria, empowering the Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, and continuing to cause dismantling disturbances throughout the Middle East. Why should we not, as a Congress of the United States, in talking about our veterans, include within that talk a clear shot across the bow for the Iranians that America will not stand for them laughing at us or poking their finger in our face when we talk about a nuclear-free Iran. We do not need a nuclear-armed Iran in the Middle East for a plethora of reasons. Most importantly, if they get one, there will be a nuclear arms race in a very unstable part of the world. That's the home of terrorism. It's the home of the biggest fear the United States of America has, and it's our best ally, Israel, lies in the path of Iranian resistance. So it's important that the sanctions be reinstated and that we have conditions on the Iranians so if they violate their promises, or they look the other way on their commitments, or they do what they're saying on their own national television networks today, they understand there will be a consequence to their actions. I remember 1979. I remember when Nightline became a television show because for 444 days Americans were held hostage in Tehran. I remember that just the day before President Reagan was sworn in as President of the United States, President Carter finally negotiated a release of the hostages in Iran for one simple reason. Iran knew that once President Carter was out of office and President Reagan came in office, he would follow through on what he had said, and that is he would do whatever it took to free the hostages. There is only one thing the Iranians understand. They understand someone who will stand up to them, someone who will take them on, and somebody who will not settle for their looking the other way on the agreements they make. It is critical and important that the Senate of the United States send a clear message to the Iranians that we will not be lied to, we will not be misled, and we will expect them to live up to the commitments they have promised they would lead up to. If they don't, there will be consequences for their action. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are already pointing out that the economy of Iran is now improving with the interim agreement that we currently have. We have no certainty in a final agreement that's coming in the next few months. We have no certainty that the Iranians are going to do what they say they're going to do anyway. And if we sit here passively saying it will be all right, if we don't let them know there will be conditions if they violate the sanctions, if we don't let them know we mean business, then America will have turned its back on the most dangerous enemy that we have, and that is the enemy of terrorism and a radical Islamic Republic of Iran. Mr. President, I appreciate our veterans and the sacrifice they've made to try and free us from terrorism. I appreciate the volunteers who have sacrificed their sacred treasure and their families and their own personal blood and their own personal life to try and defend America and liberate the people of Iraq and the people of Afghanistan. I don't want us to turn and leave the Middle East. I want us to instead let the Middle East know, and its biggest ogre, the nation of Iran, that we will not stand for a nuclear weapon in Iran. If they continue to try and progress toward that, there will be sanctions that will be crippling. America will not turn our back on Iran, but we'll stand toe-to-toe with them and say, this will not stand. And I commend Senator Burr for his leadership in including that in this portion of the Veterans Bill, those members of the Foreign Relations Committee, and the other 57 members of the Senate who have signed the Iran Sanctions Bill. And it is my hope and plea that sometime in the weeks ahead, before the Iranians think we have no teeth left at all, that we will do the right thing on the floor of the United States Senate and enhance the sanctions against the conditions of sanctions against the nation of Iran if they lie to us or fail to keep the promises they've made in the interim agreement and the ultimate permanent agreement that we make. And Mr. President, I yield back my time and would note the absence of a quorum.